Welcome to Defense Explained, a series I am making myself which aims to inform people about military subjects and history. I would like to advise you about the mature content in this video. This is the first long-form video I have made. With that out of the way, here we begin. Subterranean warfare has long been a staple of combat since humans first began to dig. It is not unique to the conflict in Gaza. Today I'll be explaining the history of this style of warfare and talk about the history and tactics. As long as the spade has existed, someone has thought to take their defense underground. As with many things in this world, our best accounts of this in the ancient world are from the ancient Greeks, Romans, and Han Chinese. They all had different ways of employing it. Some used them similarly to modern trench networks to creep closer to the enemies. Others used it to undermine walls of a besieged city to make them collapse. Their use continued into the medieval age, with the Muslims adopting this type of warfare. As well as the French army, there was an advancement in undermining walls, as they would burn guard towers or enemy forts from the interior, forcing the structure to collapse. A defense against tunneling was putting water buckets, and if the bucket moved there was likely a tunnel under. They would then put more buckets around the area to triangulate it and send counter diggers. With the invention of gunpowder, the tunnel warfare became very lethal, as explosives could finally be used to blast positions out of existence. The best diggers lived in North Africa, Middle East, and the Near East. The reason for this is the canot systems, which could be over 100 kilometers long and seen from satellites. They learned to dig tunnels for kilometers from areas with fresh water to the designated destination. Teams would dig for months, possibly years. They also built ventilation and structures for people to live to continue the maintenance of these tunnels. This experience was spread from the Atlantic coast of Morocco all the way to the Gobi Desert in the Han Empire of China. This spanned a distance of 6,000 kilometers. This is not any small distance. The entire width of the planet we live on is 12,756 kilometers. Another famous piece of subterranean work was the aqueducts of Rome. While not as widespread as canot systems, they are more known by the general public. These systems transported water to many Roman cities across 3 continents that supplied people with drinking water for millions of people. They also tunneled and laid down lead pipes, which would be some of the biggest public water and plumbing systems until the Industrial Revolution. Both the canot and aqueduct systems were brilliantly designed without modern tools or measuring equipment, and sloped as little as 1 or 2 centimeters per kilometer of tunnel. Even in the modern day, this is a difficult task, which shows that ancient people were not as unintelligent as the media portrays. The most notable use of tunnel or subterranean fighting are the following: the Siege of Vienna, in which both the Austrians and Ottomans fought brutal battles underground, and used tons of gunpowder, which created some of the largest explosions since the invention of high explosive. This would set a trend for tunnel warfare and undermining in sieges. In the Crimean War of 1850, for both sides used tunneling, with the Russians using 12 tons to blast the attackers and Allied forces used 60 tons to destroy defensive Russian positions. The further major use in the time was during the Battle of the Crater, in which Union forces detonated 3,600 kilos or 8,000 pounds of explosive, creating a crater 30 to 37 meters 100 to 120 feet wide, and at least 9 meters 30 feet deep. Despite this, the Union forces lost the battle due to high losses. During World War II, the Japanese had used tunnels effectively by digging in on the islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These 2 battles are the deadliest battles in the Pacific. Of the dead, 12,500 have died in Okinawa during the fighting, and 7,020 died in Iwo Jima. The fighting on the island of Iwo Jima was so heavy that towards the end of the battle, 5th Marine tanks expended between 5,000 to 10,000 US gallons, 19,000 to 38,000 liters, of napalm per day to clear out bunkers, tunnels, machine gun nests, and defensive structures. This brutal fighting convinced some in the US military that an invasion of Japan would be too costly, involving an estimated 500,000 to 2 million US casualties if the US invaded. This assessment ultimately led to the atomic bombing of Japan, which led to the surrender, despite some believing that Japan would surrender otherwise. Post-war, the US forces cleared out Japanese defenders years after the signing of surrender on all Pacific islands. They would fill the defenses up with seawater, tear gas, gasoline, napalm, smoke grenades, sand, or anything else they could use. The last Japanese soldier to surrender was in 1974 in Indonesia. He reportedly hid in tunnels and caves for years until he was found by the Indonesian military search party. The most famous use of this style of warfare was used by the Viet Minh or Viet Cong forces against US and Army of the Republic of Vietnam (VN). They dug tens of thousands of kilometers of tunnels since World War II during the occupation by Japanese forces. US intelligence estimated that every single province in Vietnam had at least 100 kilometers of tunnels where building was permissible, not only in Vietnam but also in Laos and Cambodia. To counter this, the United States dropped more munitions in the Vietnam War in Indochina than was dropped on Germany and Japan combined in World War II, including the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This has left Laos with the highest rate of unexploded ordnance on the planet. The people learned to live underground, creating elaborate networks underground with hospitals, kitchens, classrooms, weapons caches, and even swimming pools. This was a major problem for US forces, as the Vietnamese could choose to fight the Americans, not the other way around. If the US bombed their positions, they could choose to stay hidden. But if they had the strength, they would leave and wait to ambush incoming US forces on the ground or from the air. This led to teams hunting for tunnels, the infamous tunnel rats, with IEDs, mines, booby traps, huge pits, wild animals, or any other way of Indiana Jones type traps. This was an incredibly difficult job that required the shortest soldiers to go in with a pistol and flashlight. Anzac soldiers of Australia and New Zealand, as well as American soldiers, would ask their family back home to send them pistols or suppressors, because some of their issued firearms would blind them in the tunnel and easily deafen them. They used firearms as a last resort. Their work was instrumental in gathering intelligence, locating enemy positions for later strikes, and capturing enemy soldiers or resources. Many entered those tunnels only to never return again. This style of war is not unique to any one part of the world and has been used for millennia. The popularity of this style of warfare has risen due to the increased firepower on the battlefield. But with the advent of gunpowder weapons and cannon, the ranges of combat increased, and the amount of people with ranged weapons on the field jumped in number. With the advent of high explosive and machine guns, being exposed was much more deadly. At the same time, there were many wars larger and bigger than before. People realizing that they simply be blasted or shot to bits, they chose to go underground. From Tora Bora complex in Afghanistan to the Sikai tunnels, which ran over 125 kilometers to the city of Saigon. These have proven an instrument of resistance to one of the most prolific users of this style of warfare has been the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The tactic was commonly used in the Syrian civil war, but ISIS took it to the next level. They had entire units and teams designated to dig, build, and sabotage. When ISIS swept Syria and Iraq, they captured large areas and major cities, including their capital, Raqqa, and the second biggest city in Iraq, Mosul. When the Iraqi government requested US support, it brought in a coalition, one which included over 30 countries from the region and abroad. The air power they brought to the battle forced ISIS underground, with the coalition able to destroy ISIS infrastructure, production centers, oil and gas plants, and ISIS combat units. They had to get creative. With this, they dug in every major city and settlement they possessed, from the front line to the last refugee camp they made a last stand at in 2019. They used professional and homemade digging machines. These helped speed up the work. Alongside this, they used teams of manual labor, including prisoners and slaves, something that reminds one of what Nazi Germany did following Allied bombing. They had such complex networks that during battles against ISIS, fighters would pop out behind them oftentimes. These were not mere holes in the grounds, but well-engineered passageways even under ground cities. They had rail systems, electricity, water, food, medical supplies, munitions, housing quarters, reinforced metal doors, and anything one needs during their underground stay. Somewhere so big that car bombs could drive out of underground garages and tunnels. Many of the defenders stubbornly held out to fight even in the days, weeks, or months following the battles. Some of them used the underground positions to launch terror attacks, but only when defeated was the true extent of their underground networks revealed. Till this day they are still hiding underground waiting to launch their attacks. In the areas they left behind they left unexploded traps, killing anyone who entered to investigate. ISIS also used undermining to destroy enemy positions. By filling up tunnels or rooms with explosives under a designated area, they could use them both offensively to attack enemy positions or could use them defensively to destroy the building or compound after the enemies have captured it. In fact, they used this to great effect when ISIS set off a bomb under an Iraqi position, who then proceeded to blame the coalition airpower. This was only revealed when ISIS bragged about it in a propaganda video. Another famous group that uses them today are the Gazan militants, and some extend the use of them. By Hezbollah, we will first take a look at the people who aid them, the Islamic Republic of Iran. With the use of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps and the Quds force they are able to pass along support to their proxies. Iran itself has dug many bunkers, forts, command and control statues, even drone bases, missile silos, underground nuclear reactors, and underground air bases. They do this because of a fear of a strike on Iranian assets or targets by Israel or America due to their nuclear research program. Assistance was also allegedly provided by North Korea, who in of themselves have large networks of underground facilities like North Korea. In fact, they used these tunnels to infiltrate and even attack South Korea in the past. Hezbollah in Lebanon has used these tunnels to house their facilities, move their fighters, and cross into and attack Israel. They launched a cross-border in 2006 which killed 8 and captured 2 who later died. This would lead to the 2006 war in Lebanon. The underground facilities played a major role as the Israeli Air Force. The IAF had complete air power using their aircraft. They were able to drop thousands of bombs, many of them guided onto Hezbollah positions. They flew over 11,800 sorties, which is more than the 1973 Yom Kippur War or 1980 to Lebanon War. Not only was the bombardment from the air but also from the ground. Quoting a report from IDF internal investigation found that the artillery corps shot approximately 170,000 munitions shells during the war. A senior officer in the armored corps says that if it turns out that 5 were killed he would be surprised. This goes to show that the digging worked. It just wasted the IDF's ammunition and claimed the lives of innocent civilians, resulting in the destruction in 900 commercial structures, up to 350 schools and hospitals, and 15,000 homes. Some 130,000 more homes were damaged. Meanwhile, Hezbollah used their fortification to pop up and attack Israeli soldiers and vehicles. The majority of Israeli vehicle losses came from these attacks. Of the total 45 Merkava tanks hit by anti-tank fire, Israeli soldiers were surprised, as was said by an Israeli officer quoting him, who in military intelligence knew of the fight to the death doctrine of the fanatical foe, or of the 10-meter deep bunkers and tunnels. While in response to these attacks, Hezbollah launched over 100 rockets a day, totaling an estimated 4,000 in the war, usually using underground bases to facilitate the attacks and hide from Israeli counter-bombing. These mass rocket attacks spurred the development of the famous Iron Dome system, one Hezbollah anti-ship missile unit likely hidden underground to avoid detection managed to score a direct hit on Heinz Hanet, which killed 4 sailors. This was because the Israeli Navy didn't expect to face Hezbollah anti-ship missiles and had their missile defenses turned off as to not fire on the numerous Israeli aircraft flying over Lebanon. Israel already had teams to counter tunnels in the 2006 war, but following it they completely relooked their tactics in future situations. Now let's turn to the Palestinians, specifically focused on Gaza, but to a lesser extent the West Bank. Since the 1980s, when the Sinai Peninsula was returned to Egyptian authority following the Camp David Accords, tunnels have been used to smuggle in arms to the Gaza Strip, which was then under Israeli control. They go both ways, with groups sending out drugs and smuggling people who pay a fee, while they import arms, medicine, fuel, and other embargoed resources. Following the 2005 withdrawal and 2006 blockade due to Hamas taking forceful control of the Gaza Strip from rival political party Fatah, this resulted in the amount of tunnels skyrocketing as Israel could no longer be in the Strip itself and search for the tunnels. This left Israel with having to rely on its own air force to destroy them, or the Egyptian government to find and destroy them. The Egyptians have been cooperative with Israel due to US pressure, and more so as Egypt has been concerned since 2011 about an insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula, and with the import of drugs into Egypt they had begun to crack down. With the elections of May 2012 in Egypt, the Islamic Brotherhood came to power. They relaxed border protections to Hamas, who was another branch of the Islamic Brotherhood. But following the 2013 coup d'etat by the military and later accession to the presidency by Fattah al-Sisi, the insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula, which started to flare up with an ISIS province later being declared. This alongside with the Islamic Brotherhood being banned in Egypt, this meant that a huge crackdown began, with Egyptian authorities claiming to have shut 1,200 tunnels by 2014, with them using everything from chemicals, sewage, and concrete to stop the use of tunnels. Despite the best efforts of both Israel and Egypt, the tunnels are still able to get smuggled goods in and out. Palestinian use of tunnels in combat has included undermining Israeli bases and bombing them. In 2005, a cross-border raid into Israel resulted in the death of 2 IDF soldiers and the capture of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, who was held until 2011 when he was traded for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. In 2014, Gazan militants crossed the border using a tunnel to attempt to capture Israeli soldiers once again, but they failed to do so as the last Israeli soldier alive when about to be captured chose to fight back and was shot despite being armed as he was resisting, according to Palestinian militants. During the Operation Protective referred to as the 2014 Gaza War, the Gazans chose to use the tunnels to move under Israeli cover. While Israeli forces invaded Gaza, Israel chose to bomb the tunnels from the air and cleared out tunnels in occupied areas. But for the most part they chose to not go in and fight due to the risks, as well as the operation being of limited scale. This meant that Hamas and allied groups could still move around and attack Israeli soldiers and vehicles, even destroying some vehicles, including an M113 hit by an RPG-29, killing all 6 soldiers inside. They didn't expect to be hit as they operated with Merkava tanks, but they could never succeed in detecting those hidden units. As a result, they no longer used the M113 on the front due to its lack of armor. Israeli soldiers complained about the choice not to attack and destroy all the tunnels in response. The High Command said that the risk of being killed or lost in the system was too high and that cost of doing so was higher than assessed benefits of letting them be, despite an operation in 2012 to target the systems. They found it was a pointless task to how hard it is to find and destroy every tunnel. During the 2023 Gaza War, Hamas's militant arm Al-Qassam Brigade used tunnels to get past the first layer of fences. By passing the first layer of defenses, teams of sappers destroy the fences and move onto the border wall. Once past, they allowed other friendly units to get past, and they then drove up bulldozers to capitalize and knock down more sections of the wall. The militants used these tunnels to move in anti-tank teams to disable Israeli Merkava tanks over watching the border. The militants took advantage of surprise, as well as holes in the field of vision of defenders, and moved in small 5-man teams to reduce their footprint. Once past the defenses of the IDF, they used the same tunnels to move back into Gaza and used them to kidnap Israeli citizens and soldiers. Currently, as of writing this on October 17, 2023, the IDF has yet to enter the Gaza Strip as a part of the Operation Swords of Iron. They are likely assessing the Palestinian abilities of defense, and their underground facilities likely play a large part in the calculus of Israeli action during this likely forthcoming ground invasion. Israeli defenses and strategy. Already in the early years of the 21st century, the IDF organized the Samur Weasel, or the Israeli Tunnel Rats Company, for combating hidden weapons caches and tunnels. As part of the Yahalom Special Operations Engineering Unit of the IDF Engineering Corps, the unit is trained and equipped with means to operate within tunnels, including communications and breathing systems. Despite this unit, the IDF prefers to avoid entering tunnels it has detected, if possible, because the attacking side has no advantage in a tunnel. This capability is designed for a scenario in which a soldier has been kidnapped, or in order to attack the enemy's underground command and control positions. Israel has developed the Iron Spade system, which detects seismic activity on border defenses, following attacks launched into Israel in 2014. They have also gone about installing steel beams underground to hinder the efforts of Palestinians to dig past the border walls without alerting Israeli authorities. Israel also go about finding tunnels through intelligence, assets, or just finding the holes themselves. Depending on the context, they either bomb the tunnel or fill it in with cement to prevent its usage. The failure to detect the infiltration during 2023's Al-Aqsa flood lies in the fact that Palestinians militants choose to dig just in front of the actual border and only breach the fence on the perimeter of the Iron Spade system. This is a flaw that the IDF will attempt to rectify following the war. Israel has units to detect and destroy these tunnels as well as clear them. The Israeli defense industry may come up with more creative solutions, but the militants also will attempt to counter Israeli defenses in an arms race on their shared border. Countermeasures and defenses counter-tunneling tactics have existed since ancient times, but what we are concerned with is the modern era. During the battles of World War I, to beat these defensive structures was to shell them with heavy artillery for days on end or to storm these defenses. The battles for these forts and bunkers could last months, as defenders and attackers would attack and counter-attack. In World War II, the advent of bunker-busting munitions meant German submarine pens could no longer be safe, with the Grand Slam or earthquake bombs being used to knock holes in German defenses. Some of these bombs used concrete due to its density and affordability to defeat the bunkers. Others would use hardened steel or dense metals to defeat bunkers. The goal was to get a bomb as heavy as possible going as fast as possible. This led to some attaching rockets to the bombs to provide it with more kinetic energy upon striking its target, resulting in more penetration. An example of a rocket-assisted concrete bomb is the Disney bomb, weighing 4,500 pounds or 2,000 kilos. It wasn't to be taken lightly. These bombs used fuses set to detonate after a certain amount of floors breached or a certain amount of time. They had explosives stored deep within them to keep them safe until the point of detonation. Using these bombs, the Royal Air Force and US Army Air Force destroyed the German ability to launch sea operations with their U-boats, which provided them with a sea denial ability and enabled them to destroy US and Allied convoys, providing war materials to Britain and Allied countries. During the First Persian Gulf War of 1990, the coalition used guided munitions and some newly made bunker-busting munitions to destroy Iraqi bunkers and targets. Using guided paveway bombs, they could destroy hardened targets like Iraqi aircraft hangars and ammunition depots. But some Iraqi command and control bunkers were so far deep below ground that the WW2's deep penetrating bombs couldn't reach their depth. Thus, the US Air Force requested a new bomb be made, the WW28, made out of a forged 203mm howitzer barrel that was machined into a bomb body and attached to a bomb kit. Once the bomb was finished, after its research and production, it was filled with liquid explosives and sent to Iraq on an express delivery. It came so fast that it was said the paint still wasn't dry on it. Upon its use for the first time on an Iraqi command bunker just north of Baghdad, the Iraqi military surrendered on the same day. The Iraqi command likely realized that no target in Iraq was safe from coalition bombing, and upon the death of some of their generals chose to sign a peace agreement with Kuwait and the coalition. Since then, most modern militaries have purchased purpose-built bunker-busting munitions or relied on dual-purpose bombs. JDAM and paveway bomb kits provide users with the ability to fuse the bomb for a delayed mode, penetrate into soil or concrete, and detonate, with some going as deep as 8 meters or 26 feet. Others have used cruise missiles to deliver heat warheads using broach technology, such as the famous Storm Shadow or Taurus missile made in Germany. Even small-sized bombs like the Storm Breaker bomb, known as the small diameter bomb, are able to penetrate hardened structures such as hardened aircraft, hangars, or hardened targets. The United States has invested in making the, and I quote, WW57 massive ordnance penetrator or MOP to penetrate targets as deep as 61 meters or 200 feet, which can still not penetrate certain structures under mountains or your mother. With the development of hypersonic missile technologies, We could see a new generation of weapons utilizing speed and kinetic power never seen before. In terms of defending against these bunker-busting munitions, you could always dig deeper going into natural cave systems or digging under mountains. Many bunkers built to resist nuclear bombs were designed to defend against bunker-busting munitions and thermonuclear detonations. These bunkers use multiple layers of concrete, sit under natural systems of bedrock or other dense stones like granite. With the need to defend against nuclear weapons, some are held aloft up with floors not connected to the ground and walls separated from the earth. They use reinforced cabling with extra space and to stop it from snapping or collapsing even after being hit. Newer bunkers not only rely on these systems but also use new micro-reinforced concrete systems, like the ones used to build the new World Trade Center, to be able to withstand hits from aircraft or other weapons without collapsing. Alongside this new micro-reinforced concrete, certain bunkers use composite armor, not somewhat unlike tanks, to take advantage of different material strength or density. This makes it much harder to penetrate than just pure concrete or dirt. Another way to reduce the effective penetration of bunker busters is to put your bunkers under bodies of water, which will make it much more difficult to penetrate the inside of the structure. The best way to clear out underground networks, however, is entering with boots on the ground, as occurred in Vietnam or in 1991 with the Iraqi Talil Air Base, which was captured by coalition ground forces after a battle with the defenders. There are many units whose sole purpose is to clear out these fortifications or train in storming them from nations, states to non-state actors. The American military regularly trains on subterranean warfare. The North Korean military is likely to rely on it heavily in the event of a future Korean war, with the Iranians putting everything they can underground. Hezbollah plans on storming Israeli defenses. Hamas relies on it, and Israel has to clear out tunnels in both Lebanese and Palestinian underground networks. These defenses pose a huge problem for defenders and offer certain actors the ability to hide their true strength for battles that they are willing to fight. The future is uncertain, but what is certain is that someone, somewhere is going to be using the earth around them to hide from their sworn enemy hunting them from above. That is it for today. It took a lot of effort and I am a student. If you like what you see, please subscribe, like or share. Thank you for watching. Defense Explained, and goodbye until next time.